Okay. So this is our week 3 class. Before we start lecturing, let me address some of these points. First is the course content. So first of all, I actually updated your homework 3 due date. It will be due next Wednesday. So yeah, before it's still like this Sunday, but because I try to design your homework 3 to be some like practical homework with Audacity. And we're not going to talk about, sorry, we're not going to talk about Audacity in this class. We'll talk about Audacity in our Wednesday lecture. So okay. So I will publish your homework tomorrow, and you will have 1 week to do your homework after Wednesday's lecture. Okay, so your homework 3 will be due on Wednesday next week. So this week you only have a project proposal. Okay. So this week you only have project proposal due on Thursday. Okay. Let me see. Yes. So in assignment, if you go here, you'll see this project proposal. Here is the requirements, okay? In this description. So project proposal should be 1 to 2 pages. You just identify your research topic. So what topic you would do, and point out the in-class sources. So in-class sources can be any reading or video provided in class. Okay, and you just submit your project proposal to your TA or me, and we will have one week. Okay, so we will give you feedback in 1 week, and then after you get the confirmation from your TA, you can start working on your final project or final paper. Okay, so yeah, I think I addressed this in our first lecture. So I think you can just read through this description. It should be pretty clear, and let me know if you have like more questions. Okay. So your final paper will have some other like requirements here. And also you can choose to do some projects like hands-on project programming, things like that. But yeah, if you choose not to do a paper, okay, let me go back here. So you have 2 choices. One is to write a research paper. So this is like I think most people would do. Yeah, you just choose a topic from class, and you do some research, find some literature, and write a research paper. I think this would be yeah, something most people will choose. But if you have STEM background, and if you do want to program using some of the softwares I recommended in class, this is not required. So if you want to do this, then you don't need to write a paper, but you need to like just communicate with me, like tell me what project you want to do, and I will help you on this direction, and I will tell you what you need to submit in terms of project proposal, and the final project. Okay, so this will be some special choice, I would say, if you want to do some hands-on programming project. But normally people, yeah, you just write a research paper, like over 1,000 words. Yeah, the requirements are here, right? The 2 choice. If you choose research paper, then you just obey those requirements, like technical format, minimum 1,200 words, and do some just style your paper, and do some citation. But do make sure that you set at least 5 sources in the bibliography, and at least 3 in-class sources. Okay. So I think the requirements yeah, should be at least 3 in-class sources. So make sure your topic is relevant to what we are covering in this course. So this will be your project proposal. So based on our syllabus, it's due this Thursday, and we will give you feedback by next Thursday, week 4 Thursday. And then you can start working on this project, and you basically have, like nearly 10 days to do your final project. Not really 10 days, one week, okay? So your final project will be due on Wednesday. So you have, approximately 1 week to work on your final paper, final project. It will be due like on Wednesday because you need to give the TA some time to grade, because we need to, it's a summer course, it's very tight schedule. When you submit your grade, on like by the end of week 5. So you need to submit this on Wednesday so that we have, at least 2 or 3 days to grade. So this is the schedule of your work. And in terms of teaching, okay, so I think I need to give you the teaching schedule now because you are doing this project proposal. Okay, so actually I list a lot of things here, but yeah, actually we went a little bit slow because I want to get deep into every topic and give you a full kind of scope of that specific field. So actually, this symbolic music, it actually took one week. So week 1, we covered this symbolic music representation. Week 2, we talk about physics of sound waves and physics modeling. And this week, we will continue with music technology and talk about something like digitalization of sound sampling. So this will be week 3. So actually, every lecture here actually took one week. So therefore, we don't really have time to cover all the topics here. So, and then we'll continue with we'll talk about frequency domain and some like basic, very, not really technical, not really math part of Fourier transform, but just give you intuitive understanding of what is Fourier transform and what is frequency domain, and something related to digital signal processing. So this will be our week 4, and week 5 we'll talk about psychoacoustics, auditory processing, and the musical mind. Okay, so I don't think we have time to cover all those things here. But for guest lecture, yeah, because I got a little bit sick this week, so I didn't reach out to our guest, but I will do this this week, and if I can get some guests, they will be here, like talk for 1 hour or just 1 hour and a half. So this will be a tentative schedule. So if I can invite guests, we will have guest lecture, but it won't be 3 hours. Okay, it will only be like 1 hour. So for the rest of the time, we will still continue lecturing. Yeah, but for mathematical music theory and some more musical parts. So actually, the first part is more about sound, right? So this course is about the science of sound and music. So because we cover too much about sound, so we don't really have time to really get into the music part. So yeah, so this more like musical or artistic parts, yeah, we don't have time to cover in this lecture so far, like mathematical music theory and emotion and meaning in music and algorithmic composition, and also some neural networks. But I think actually, if you think about science, right, it's like more sound is more like scientific, like auditory processing. But for music, because it's more related to like psychology, cognitive science, and perception, and the brain. Yeah, like the musical mind, because music is created by human, right? It's not it doesn't have a natural law. It's not like hearing, because you can study your hearing auditory system scientifically, but it's very difficult to to talk about music scientifically, really, because music is more like subjective. It's like very like human, like and also very personal, like your personal preference, like someone's music is someone's noise, right? So that would be a deeper topic. That would be a deeper topic, and I also don't think I'm not sure if I'm really prepared to talk about the science of music. Okay. I'm also like exploring and have some basic understanding of that, and I don't think anyone can really talk about the science of music now, like because people are still like exploring this process. I think yeah, there is a really like pioneering book on emotion and meaning in music, okay, in 1960s. So that was a milestone in the study of science of music, okay, of music. And after that, people just somehow stuck there and talking about, emotion and meaning and prediction and information theory, all things like that. But nothing of these are really proven. Right? There is no like proof that this is true, this is correct or not. So if we talk about this part, things will be more like explorative, creative, and not that certain. Okay, it's not that easy to talk about this. But for those topics, like music information retrieval, sound waves, sound sampling, and free transformer, these are just pure science. Okay, we can just quantitatively talk about this, and this is correct, this is true, this was established for like hundreds of years, and everyone just tested this. So whatever, I think I'm just talking too much about this, but because it's a short course, and yeah, I think based on my current ability, I think the best choice probably is to introduce you with something that I am sure and everyone is sure, and make sure I don't introduce you some wrong ideas or something not that correct, okay, not that scientific, or something too subjective. Okay, so therefore we are going to talk about these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 topics for our 5 weeks class. Okay, so because you are doing your project proposal, so I actually published all our modules here. So so this is additional. So everything in the modules, okay, in these 5 modules, you can choose from any of those to to be your research topic for your project, okay, including the neural networks. I don't think we have time to talk about this. So if Professor Shlomo Dubno will come, I think he will briefly talk about this in his guest lecture. But because he actually went to Tokyo recently, so I'm not sure if he will really make to our class. But whatever, there are some good readings, and there are many online resources you can refer to if you want to choose this topic as your project, your final project. This is this is a valid choice. And also, so this is our content for this week. Okay, so here is a book, some introductory book to digital signal processing, and the playlist. Actually, these are not really like the full content. I will continue to add more like playlist videos and also the readings. Yeah, in this week and next week, yeah, I add more content into this. But so far, this is our established schedule. And if you try to form your project proposal, I think these are like just enough content for you at least to form a brief idea on what you want to do. And if you want to dig into more of those, I will add more content, yeah, in the following days. I think this is a good book for a reference. Okay, this book is kind of popular science, so very so it doesn't have any preliminary, nothing technical. So I think what I'm teaching is probably more too technical, but this book is a kind of popular science book, you know. If you open any of this chapter, you can just read this, kind of, chill and not that difficult, okay? And it covers actually all the basic concepts in music and sound, and even some some math, some cognitive science. So I think this book is a really good book to read and to kind of formulate your project proposal, your project ideas. So yeah, so I will recommend you read through this book if you still don't have any idea about what you want to do for your project. I would say this book is easy to read and no preliminary, and also it covers many concepts, many basic concepts here. That is and all the content here is relevant to what I intend to cover in this lecture, in this course. Okay. Any questions? See. Okay. So if there's no question, I believe it should be clear. So any readings, videos in the modules can be a good reference for your project proposal, and you need to cite at least 3 resources from here, from the modules in your final paper. Okay. Okay. So after introducing those basic like logistics, okay. So let's continue with our course. So today we will continue with the list of music technology. So if you remember last time we talked about the printing industry, right? The music notations, the symbolic music representation, the sheet music, right? The printed like music scores. It's related to the printing industry. And then we talk about the vowels, right? The vowel, and then we just deviated from the vowel to talk about the sound waves. So now we are going back to this list of music technology and how those, inventions of music technology media changed the music industry. Okay, so there is a picture of the evolution, the timeline of music evolution, the music players. So the first is the phonograph, right? The viol. We talked about phonograph and gramophone and records. You're playing the records, the viols, and then here is a cassette tape. The cassette tape is something we're going to cover today, and then it's compact disc. Here is a boombox. I think boombox is something you play the cassette tape. I guess. Okay. Yeah. This is too old also for me. And then it's like MP3, like Walkman. And this is some, just some portable music player of different formats so that you can bring the music with you. And, if you plug in your earphone, you can listen to music wherever you go. And there are also like radio, right? The radio receiver. Before that, you have no format to download music. You have only a radio, and the radio station will play music for you, and you just receive the radio on air. Okay, and then it's the technology just developed, and now you have the your smartphone, right? Your smartphone, and then you have iPod and iPod Touch, and this just more advanced. So it's kind of like an evolution of MP3 players. I don't know how many of you really like listen to MP3 or ever owned an MP3, but I really did when I was a kid. Okay, it was still the age of MP3, so it's very small. It's pretty small. Okay, it's very small, and you can just download your music into that small device, and you can play your earphone. So yeah. And at that time, when I was a kid, like, uh, middle school, high school, and because I think at that time we do have smartphone, but if you are a student, in middle school, high school, you are not allowed to bring your phone to school. Therefore, my parents just bought me a like small MP3 because I really like it, and it's not that expensive, so that I can just listen to music. Yeah, when I want to. But nowadays, I don't think, yeah, anyone still use MP3. Everyone just own your smartphone, and everything is on your phone. You can do basically everything using just one device. Okay, so so we will continue with this list. So the first is jukebox. So now we are still in vinyl with the records and vinyl. Okay, so playing records and vinyl, at that time you need to have the device, right? Like gramophone or phonograph. And at that time, only people like at least you need to have money and have the space in your room, in your house to store these things. And these are only, the entertainment for kind of, higher class people or rich people. But what about people, what about people like, who don't have those devices, who want to listen to music at that time? So there was something called jukebox. Okay, so a jukebox is a partially automated music playing device, usually a coin-operated machine that plays a patron's selection from self-contained media. So jukebox is something commercial. So if you go into some uh uh a store with a jukebox, and you have the coin, and then you can just do, you insert your coin into the jukebox, and then you can choose the record you want to play, and then you can listen to the music. Okay. The classic jukebox has buttons with letters and numbers on them, which are used to select specific records and vinyls. Traditional jukeboxes um, uh, Traditional jukebox once were an important source of income for record publishers. Jukeboxes received the newest recordings first. They became an important market testing device for new music, since they tallied the number of plays for each title. They let listeners control the music outside of their home before audio technology became portable, right? So became like audio technology became portable. And also, if you don't have money or resource to buy your own device to play the records, then jukebox is just something, convenient. Just go there and just insert one coin, and then you can listen to a record of your own choice. And it also gives, the information to the record publishers so that they know, for each of the songs, for each of the recording, how many times they were played, so that they know which song is more popular, and which song is more like which artist is more popular, which helps them to make the marketing decisions, right? So this is the history of jukebox. So actually, it is pretty old. You see, this jukebox story is like 1958. Okay, so let's watch this video. I don't know why. Um, Sorry, because I want to.
Here is a modern equivalent of the old Palm Court, a coffee bar in Hampstead, London. The sober atmosphere is unchanged, but automation seems to have hit the old orchestra. For the jukebox, normally associated with jazz and rock and roll, is rapidly becoming respectable.
Somehow weird, because I want to...
Here is a modern equivalent of the old Palm Court, a coffee bar in Hampstead, London. The sober atmosphere is unchanged, but automation seems to have hit the old orchestra. For the jukebox, normally associated with jazz and rock and roll, is rapidly becoming respectable, and even plays that type of old-fashioned music that one used to hear among the potted palms. At least this way, it's easier than asking the band leader for a favorite tune. There's no danger of having your request refused, provided you put your money in, of course. And now, behind the scenes at a factory in Ilford, Essex, to see how that orchestra is fitted into the box. The envy of all do-it-yourself experts is this profiling machine, which paves the way for the speaker assembly and gets it done before you can say, slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Several hundred of these machines are completed every month, many of them for export. In one of the larger machines, which offers a choice of 160 different tunes, there is no less than 1,000 feet of wire, used mainly for the complicated selector button system. Fixing and soldering the leads to the selector button assembly is an exacting and skilled job, particularly as the wires are in 10 different colors and each machine has to be fitted with 81 leads. One of the most delicate tasks is the assembly of the record return arm, which must be accurate to 1/5000th of an inch. And introducing one of the few people we know who twists a lot of arms and gets paid for it. The final testing of the mechanism requires skill, patience, and great care. Each machine is given a mechanical third degree lasting 8 hours, and every last minute part takes its turn under the spotlight. Not a new dodge for getting to the tea trolley before everyone else, but a labor and backache-saving device, both important factors here in the final assembly department, where the amplifier is fitted and last-minute adjustments made to the mechanism. The finished machine is installed in a coffee bar where it will give enjoyment to thousands of lovers of light music. So be it rock or skiffle, Strauss or Stravinsky, we're going to see and hear a lot more of the jukebox.
Okay, so this is a brief introduction to the jukebox, how it's made and how people use that. So after the bio, now I want to introduce you with the technology called radio. Okay. But radio is a very important technology. It's not only for music, right? It's more for transmission, sound transmission, and even image, television, and everything. It uses this thing called radio waves. Okay. So radio is the technology of communicating using radio waves. Radio waves are electromagnetic waves of frequency between 3 Hz and 300 GHz, okay, gigahertz. They are generated by an electronic device called a transmitter connected to an antenna, which radiates the waves. So this is the picture of the antenna. I believe many of you should have seen this, everywhere. This is called antenna, and these are used to, receive and transmit the radio waves. So this antenna will radiate the waves to the world. I mean, not really with the world, but to the broad. And then if you are around this antenna in a certain distance, and then you can receive the radio waves, using some device. So for radio, so here is another video on like how popular radio was in 1930s and how it influenced like people's life. Okay.
The most popular form of entertainment in the 1930s was radio. What were some of the most listened to radio programs? Who were the biggest radio celebrities of the day? Radio burst onto the scene in the 1920s and quickly became a national craze. No other new product caught on as quickly as radio. Everyone wanted to have one in their home. 2 years after radios went on the market, radio sales were bringing in more than $60 million a year. Radios came in all shapes and sizes, too. The least expensive models could be purchased for about $8. A nice radio might cost about $50. The most expensive radios on the market were the size of a chest of drawers and cost more than $500. By the dawn of the 1930s, about half of the homes in the country had a radio. There were also more than 500 radio stations operating in the United States. Radio networks quickly developed programming to entertain their listeners. During the workday, when most listeners were housewives, romance and drama programs were featured. The Romance of Helen Trent, Stella Dallas, and Life Can Be Beautiful were all popular programs. These shows were usually sponsored by products that housewives needed, such as laundry detergent or dish soap. Thus, these programs became known as soap operas. The after-school hours were usually filled with action and adventure programs for kids. Flash Gordon, Pop Harrigan, Sky King, and Superman were amongst the most popular. These programs usually ran 15 minutes and kept children engaged while their mother prepared the evening meal. In the evening, everyone would gather around the radio and listen to programs the entire family might enjoy. The Lone Ranger and Amos and Andy were both popular evening programs. Shows such as The Shadow would hook listeners with popular catchphrases like, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows." One of the most popular programs of the 1930s was hosted by Jack Benny. However, it was not known as The Jack Benny Show. As many programs of that era were, the show was named after the product that sponsored it. In this case, the show was known as the Jell-O program. With the rapid growth of radio's popularity, companies had been quick to realize how effective it could be for promoting products. Medicines, food, soft drinks, coffee, and even cars were all advertised on the radio. Stations also realized how effective radio could be as a source of news. Radio listeners of the era grew accustomed to the phrase, "We interrupt this broadcast," which was usually followed by a breaking news bulletin. As technologies improved, many stations even featured a live man on the scene who would report about events taking place. Probably the nation's best-known voice on the radio in the 1930s was that of President Franklin Roosevelt. Throughout the decade, he offered periodic radio addresses known as fireside chats. These addresses were intended to assure the nation that, although times were tough, things would get better.
Okay. So you can see how radio was popular at that time. Right? When people don't have other ways of entertainment, it's not like nowadays, right? Like high technology, even artificial intelligence were there, and we can just access, YouTube videos and all kinds of, digital products easily. At that time, like, people don't have any other entertainment. And for housewife, for people like, usually you just at that time, like 1930s. So when radio came out, you can imagine like how popular it was. Like it was like it's like television, like computers, like nowadays, all those entertainment ways. So we will talk a little bit deeper on the radio communication, the process of radio communication and the like kind of working principle of the radio station and the radio waves. So in radio communication systems, information is carried across space using radio waves. At the sending end, the information to be sent is converted by some type of transducer to a time-varying electrical signal called the modulation signal. Okay. So at the sending end, when you send the information, right, it will be converted by some type of transducer to a time-varying electronic signal. So the transducer will be like the microphone, right? The microphone, the speaker, like that. So it converts like your voice or other signal to electrical signal, and then it can be transmitted. Okay, so this electrical signal is called the modulation signal. So the modulation signal is applied to a radio transmitter. In the transmitter, an electric oscillator generates an alternating current oscillating at a radio frequency called the carrier wave, because it serves to carry the information through the air. The information signal is used to modulate the carrier, varying some aspect of the carrier wave, impressing the information on the carrier. So we'll talk about this in much more like detail and depth, in our next few slides. Here, the idea is that, right, in the transmitter, there is some alternating current, right? An electronic oscillator generates an alternating current oscillating so that it generates the carrier wave. Right? So there is a carrier signal and the modulation signal. Okay, so just remember, the modulation signal is the signal that I kind of now I speak. This is the modulation signal. This is the signal that have the information. A carrier wave or carrier signal is the constant or the signal that's just generated by the system, okay, at a radio frequency. So this is something just continuously generating, and this is to carry the information on the modulation signal. So if you impose or impress the modulation signal on the carrier signal, you kind of encode your information from your modulation signal to this carrier, and this carrier will carry this information throughout the space to the other end, and then your information will be transmitted, right, to the other person on that end. So here is a graph on this process, okay, video communication. Okay, let me read this project topic. Yes, yes, it doesn't have to be something we already talked about. It can be anything on this course. Yeah, even if for the content we haven't covered. Yeah, that's why I just published all those content, all those readings there. So yes, you can do yeah, anything related to this course is okay. Yeah, so it can be content in week 4 and week 5. So let me continue with this radio communication, okay? So here is this process, the process of radio communication. So the information such as sound is converted by a transducer such as a microphone to an electrical signal. So here is like people speaking, and then this sound wave, right? We talk about sound wave a lot. Sound wave is this sound wave will go through this microphone. So this transducer is microphone, and will become an electronic signal, right, in the microphone. And this electronic signal will go through this thing called electronic processor. Okay? So it will process this signal somehow, and then it goes to transmitter. So this transmitter. Okay, so here information such as sound is converted by transducer to an electronic signal which modulates a radio wave produced by the transmitter. Okay, so this transmitter will produce the carrier wave. Okay. So this transmitter will generate carrier wave. Therefore, now because you have this modulation signal generated by your mouth, like your sound, and then this electronic signal will be impressed on this carrier wave, and then these two waves will be, not really simply added together, but there is some modulation process, and then it will generate this kind of wave. So this is actually called amplitude modulation, right? AM. So we know there is amplitude modulation, AM, and frequency modulation, FM, right? This is the radio. If you listen to radio, you know AM and FM. So this is what it means actually. So this is generating some amplitude modulation, and actually here this high frequency wave, right? This high frequency wave here is actually generated by the transmitter. So these are the carrier waves, and these slower waves here, right? This package is actually generated by your mouth. So this is the electronic signal, okay, the electronic waves. Okay. So from here, then your transmitter actually generated this this wave, this carrier wave modulated by the signal, and it will be transmitted through space, through a long distance actually. And after a long distance of transmitting, it reaches the receiver. And when it reaches the receiver, the electronic signal will be extracted. So the information will be extracted from this composed signal, and then this extracted signal will be pushed through another transducer, like the speaker, right? And then you can listen to what was said at this end through the speaker. So here a receiver intercepts the radio wave, right? The receiver here will intercept the radio wave and extracts information bearing modulation signal, which is converted back to a human usable form with another transducer, such as a loudspeaker. So this is the process of radio communication. Okay. So in this process, we already talked about sound waves. We talked about sound waves. We talked about speaker, right? Microphone, speaker, and the electromagnetic induction. This is the reverse process. It is the same, right? It's the same. So now what's left here, what we still don't know is this part. Okay, how the modulation was done, how the modulation was implemented. Okay. So in terms of this, in terms of how the carrier wave and the modulation wave are composed together, we'll talk about the details here. So this is the modulation methods. There are actually not really just two modulation methods. There are many modulation methods, but the most known, the most well-known, and most used is the AM and FM, which is amplitude modulation and the frequency modulation. Okay, so let's see the sinusoidal carrier is of this form. So FC is the carrier. Okay, FC is the frequency of the carrier wave. And let's say the carrier is of this sinusoidal, is a cosine wave. And FC is the carrier's base frequency. Okay, and AC is the carrier's amplitude. So amplitude, frequency, and this is just a sinusoidal cosine wave, and this is the carrier wave, the carrier signal. So amplitude modulation actually follows this formula. And this FM is the modulation. Okay, M means modulation. So this is the signal we generate. So this is a signal with information. Okay, this is a signal with information. And this signal with information is used to modulate the given carrier. Okay, so this is the carrier. This is something constant. Actually, doesn't really change once FC is fixed. Okay, so this is the time varying signal that we generate, and this signal is actually added to the frequency. Okay, although no, added to the amplitude. Okay, so AC is the amplitude. So your amplitude will add this modulation. This modulation signal is added to your amplitude, and then this sum times the carrier wave. Okay, so this is why it's called amplitude modulation, because it modulates the amplitude. Your modulating signal is added to the amplitude. That's why this is called amplitude modulation. So this is one way of modulating. Another way is called FM, is the frequency modulation. So namely, why it's called frequency modulation, because the modulation signal is added to the frequency, right? So here in FM, your amplitude doesn't change, but inside the cosine, actually, because this is your carrier frequency, right? And then your modulation signal is added to the frequency term, right? So the question is, actually, if you want to do this frequency modulation, it should be something like this, right? Because this is your carrier frequency, and it should add this FM directly, right? It should be something like this, and it should be 2 pi FC plus FMT. If it's like this form, we see all this frequency modulation because it directly modulates this frequency, right, by adding them together. But why it's not of this form? Okay, so to explain this, I will use this this link. So actually the reason is here. So actually I just wrote, right? If you think about this easily, it should be 2 pi FC plus FM T, right? So why it's not this of this form? So actually, because FC is a constant, So it's not a function of t, but FM is actually time varying. So FM is a function of t. Okay. So your FM is a function of t. Therefore, if you want to compute FM, for example, if for example this is your FM, okay, so this is t, this is your FM. You want to compute the accumulative change of FM in this time period, right? It doesn't make sense if you just say, okay, FM times t, right? Because FM is a function of t, therefore you will use this integral, okay? You will instead of this, you'll say, okay, from, let's say this from 0 to t, we'll say 0 to t, and then this will be FM t, okay, and dt. Just some basic integral, because FM is time varying. Okay, then this is why, so intuitively or ideally it should be of this form, but we don't write it, we write it in another form because FM is time varying. Therefore, you can see here when you add these two frequencies together, and it goes through this time integral. Okay, and then you decompose this integral, you get these two terms, and this is the frequency modulation. Okay. So and also here it explains why it's not of this form, it's of this integral form. So for sinusoidal, because here we see this is a sine, right? But actually the wave is still cosine. It is sine because the integral of cosine A is sine, right? So if you integral FM xm, so this xm is cosine. Okay, I cannot find that, but yeah, this xm is cosine. Is cosine 2 pi FM t. Okay, and then you compute the integral of cosine is sine. Okay, and then there's some constant coefficient here. Yeah, this is where the sine comes from. And then you do this, you insert this expression into this formula, you will get this expression. Okay, so and this is the frequency modulation, okay, of two sinusoidal waves, of two cosine waves actually. Okay, your FC and FM are all cosine waves, and this is the expression we get here for the frequency modulation. Okay. Hope everything is clear. Yeah. So, and this is the graph. Okay, so this is a signal. You can see this is a sinusoidal wave, and this is AM. So after you do this amplitude modulation here, this formula, you will get a wave of this form. This is amplitude modulation. So you can see the amplitude actually changes. And this is frequency modulation. After you do this, this is the wave you will get. You can see, the density, right? It's different. How dense. So this is like the longitudinal wave we just talked about, right? So there's some compression. This compression. This is rarefication, and the frequency are different. At different time and different points. And this is the modulation. The most popular radio modulation is AM and FM. Here is a video that talks about how AM and FM works. We'll watch this. This is a pretty old video. I like the video. I like the quality actually. It brings you. It not only tells you the knowledge, right? The knowledge of radio waves, of amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. It also brings you back to that age, to that time, like how sound was recorded and how videos were made is very different from how the YouTube videos are made by the YouTubers nowadays. It's a pretty old, and I really like this the texture or the quality of this video. Okay, so let's watch this together.
Let us review in detail the separate actions which...
Right, you can hear this noise, this background noise. Actually, this is a very like signature of the radio transmission, because when you do use the radio transmission, there is a lot of information loss during the transmission, and when you decode the signal, when you extract the signal from the carrier wave, there will be a lot of noise. Therefore, the background noise is also a specific signature of this kind of process of radio communication.
Take place in an AM transmitter. The information or intelligence to be transmitted starts as sound waves which travel through air. The microphone picks up these waves and transforms them into electrical energy. Now the intelligence travels into the transmitter, taking the form of audio frequency voltages. Audio frequencies generally fall within a range of from 300 to 3,000 cycles per second. However, it is not practical to transmit these audio frequencies directly. An oscillator provides a much higher frequency. This radio frequency wave is called a carrier. By means of a modulator and one or more RF amplifiers, the amplitude variations of the audio signal and the radio frequency carrier are combined. Now the intelligence takes the form of amplitude variations in the carrier. The amplitude modulated RF carrier is fed to the antenna, from which it is radiated through space to the receiving antenna. Once the signal has left the antenna, however, it can be affected by many disturbances. For example, one such disturbance can be lightning. Let's freeze the signal at the receiver antenna and see what the interference has done to it. Our primary concern is with the amplitude variations, for they carry the intelligence. To a point, the variations are just as we transmitted them, and the AM system was working fine. But the lightning has added new variations. These are superimposed upon the variations carrying intelligence. There are many man-made devices and natural elements or occurrences that can affect the amplitude of the RF carrier. Each one adds more hash, more static, more interference. The receiving antenna will pick up both the composite RF waves from the transmitting antenna and the random noises generated by the lightning. These two will combine and distort the amplitude of our desired signal. Now, a partial review of what happens in the AM receiver. The amplitude modulated RF carrier is picked up by the receiver's antenna. The receiver extracts the intelligence carried by the RF, transforms it back to an audio signal, amplifies it, and feeds it to the speaker. It emerges from the speaker as sound waves, which can be heard and understood by the human ear, unless the intelligence is smothered by interference. To see how interference gets through to the speaker, one of the receiver components, the detector or demodulator, must be examined. The detector receives the RF and transforms its amplitude variations into corresponding audio voltage variations. The detector does its job well, but blindly. It cannot think or interpret. Feed it an RF signal with constant amplitude, and there will be no output signal. Feed it a modulated RF, and it will provide an audio signal which mirrors the amplitude variations of that RF. Feed it an RF signal that has been hashed up by interference, and the audio signal will contain an accurate reproduction of that same interference. The audio signal mirrors the interfered RF signal fed into the detector. There you have a major disadvantage of AM radio. It is unable to separate the intelligence from the hash and static that appear when conditions are unfavorable. In frequency modulation, the frequency of the carrier is modulated, as evidenced by the uneven spacing of the waves, rather than the amplitude. An unmodulated carrier would be the same for FM as it is for AM. It has constant frequency and constant amplitude in its unmodulated condition. The carrier frequency, which is determined by the oscillator, is called the rest frequency. So long as there is no audio signal, the carrier is unaffected. But see what happens when an audio signal is applied, starting with the negative half cycle. For this illustration, the negative half cycle causes the carrier to drop below its rest frequency, as evidenced by the wider spaced waves. When the positive half cycle of the audio signal is added, it causes the carrier to rise above its rest frequency, as evidenced by the narrow space waves. This is an audio signal of one complete cycle with a corresponding frequency-modulated RF wave underneath it. A variation of the amplitude in the audio signal is accurately reflected by a frequency variation or modulation in the RF carrier. The negative half cycle of the audio made the carrier drop below rest frequency, and the positive half cycle of the audio made the carrier rise above rest frequency. The carrier's ability to reflect the amplitude of the audio signal can be easily visualized. But how will it record changes in the frequency of the audio signal? This question can be answered by changing the frequency of the audio signal and observing the results in the carrier. If the frequency of the audio signal is doubled, then in the same period of time, there will be 2 complete cycles instead of 1. Note that the amplitude of the 2-cycle audio signal is the same as the amplitude of the single-cycle audio signal. Now let's see what this has done to the carrier. As before, the carrier responded to the amplitude of the negative half cycle by dropping below rest frequency, and the carrier responded to the amplitude of the positive half cycles by rising above rest frequency. Thus, the carrier has moved above rest frequency twice as often in the same interval of time, and the carrier has moved below rest frequency twice as often in the same period of time in response to the doubling of the audio signal frequency. But since the amplitude of the audio signal was not changed, the distance above and below rest frequency traveled by the carrier has remained constant. A typical FM channel, 40 megacycles, would be located here. This is the rest frequency of the channel. When the carrier is frequency modulated, it will move above and below its rest frequency. In other words, it will need room on the spectrum to carry its frequency variations. A typical amount of room might be 15 kilocycles above rest and 15 kilocycles below rest. To avoid conflict with adjacent FM channels, 10 kilocycle guard bands are added on each end. This typical channel will allow the carrier a 15 kilocycle deviation above and below its rest frequency. Add to this the 10 kilocycles on each end for guard bands, and the total band width is 50 kilocycles. The 50 kilocycles band width is not a standard. All FM transmitters do not have the same deviations. It will vary in accordance with the equipment's design and mission, but the principles under study apply to any and all FM transmitters. Ordinarily, an audio frequency wave is visualized horizontally like this. But in order to see more clearly its modulating effect on the carrier, let's shift it about and direct it at the channel. Notice that the amount of deviation above and below rest frequency is determined by the amplitude of the modulating signal. If we raise or lower the frequency of the modulating signal, we increase or decrease only the speed at which the carrier moves above and below its rest frequency. We do not change the extent of its deviation. Only by changing the amplitude of the modulating signal do we change, decrease, or increase the extent of deviation above and below rest. FM circuitry is designed so that maximum amplitude of the modulating signal will cause the carrier to deviate to the maximum frequency range assigned to it. Note that this does not include the guard band, or in other words, the carrier will swing as far above and below its rest frequency as it can go. Now that we are familiar with the basic principles of FM, let's make a quick rundown of the components that make it possible. The transmitter's components are similar in name to their AM equivalents, and they do similar jobs, but in a different way. The audio circuits provide the audio frequency signal, which is fed to the modulator. The action of the modulator is such that the output of the oscillator is a frequency-modulated RF wave. The components of the FM receiver are a bit more complex, for they have an additional factor to contend with. The incoming carrier contains intelligence in the form of frequency variations, but it also contains amplitude distortions, hash and static. These we do not want. Since these distortions are located along the amplitude peaks of the carrier, we can eliminate them by eliminating the peaks. This is accomplished by a circuit that clips the peaks by limiting the amount of current flow induced by the positive and negative alternations of the carrier. This stage is called a limiter. Its output is a wave that still carries the intelligence in the form of frequency variations, but it no longer includes the extremes of amplitude that carried any interference picked up during transmission. The next step is to extract the intelligence, to change the frequency variations back into audio frequency voltage variations, which we can then amplify and feed to a speaker. In an FM receiver, this is the function of the demodulator or discriminator. You might say that the discriminator in FM is the rough equivalent of the detector in an AM receiver. Feed the frequency modulated carrier into the discriminator and its output will be an audio frequency voltage. Feed it an RF signal with constant frequency and there will be no output signal. All FM discriminators do the same job, but not all do it the same way. For a briefing in the fundamentals of the discriminator, let's take a simplified look at how this typical discriminator does its job. We are primarily concerned with two things, the wave and the discriminator. In place of the wave, this vertical line will represent the range of input frequencies to the discriminator. This horizontal line represents the frequency range of the carrier. It also will represent rest frequencies. This line will represent the maximum deviation above rest frequency, and this line will represent the maximum deviation below rest frequency. On this scale, we will see the frequency of the carrier as it arrives at the discriminator. Now we'll add another scale. This one will measure the voltages of the audio frequency signal coming from the discriminator's output. We'll add 3 dotted lines. One will represent 0 voltage. A second line will represent peak positive voltage, and a third will represent peak negative voltage. When the carrier is at rest frequency, the audio output voltage of the discriminator will be 0. Thus, an unmodulated carrier results in no audio signal. For this illustration, when the carrier deviates above rest frequency, the circuitry of the discriminator generates a positive voltage. When the carrier drops back down to rest frequency, the positive voltage gradually diminishes. When the carrier deviates below rest frequency, the discriminator responds with a negative voltage at its output. When the carrier moves back up to rest frequency, the negative voltage diminishes to 0. Now watch the continuous action. Note that the amplitude of the audio signal is an accurate reflection of the amount of the carrier's deviation above and below rest frequency. Also note that the frequency of the audio signal is an accurate reflection of the rate or speed at which the carrier registers its deviations. Thus, the audio signal's two characteristics, its amplitude and its frequency, are an accurate reflection of the carrier's amount of deviation and rate of deviation. In this way, we have transformed an RF carrier's frequency variations back into an audio frequency signal. From the discriminator, the audio goes into an audio amplifier, and from there to a speaker or headphones. The intelligence has completed the trip from transmitter to receiver.
And so gives a kind of very detailed illustration of the radio communication process. And let me see, what is this? Frequency modulation part 1, basic principles. The United States Army presents, TF-11. So this is some, at that time, I would say like 100 years ago, about, it's like army and, military use radio. It's not really for people like, normal people like us, for entertainment. It's more used for military purposes. Therefore, most of those tutorials are produced, by the army, and all those, high technology were kind of, mastered by those military specialties. And that time, it's also the World War I or World War II, right? So yeah, the world is on the war. Therefore, those technology are more like confidential. Not like now, right? Now everything is open source and you have access to everything. But at that time, like everything is confidential. Everything is is a secret. It's the kind of yeah, just some historical notes. Okay. So whatever, let's continue with our illustration. So why modulation? Why we need to use a carrier wave, right, to transmit the signal? Why we don't just simply like transmit the original signal, right? Like I'm talking now, like you just transmit this signal directly to the other end, right? And people, and you don't need to go through this complex process of modulation, demodulation, and amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and by why people will use this modulation method, why people go through such a complex process. So the reason is that this carrier wave usually has a much higher frequency than the message signal does. So because as the normal signal, like the sound wave, or the people speak, the frequency you can hear actually at a quite low frequency, and the carrier wave is designed with much higher frequency. But why? So this is because it's impractical to transmit signals with low frequencies. Generally, to receive a radio wave, one needs a radio antenna with length that is 1/4 of wavelength, right? So this is just some simple math if you want to do this. Okay, so you need a radio antenna, right, to transmit the radio wave. So for the radio antenna, its length is 1/4 of wavelength. Therefore, the longer the wavelength, the higher, right, the antenna. So because our generated frequency are low frequencies, so if you remember the formula, lambda is the wavelength. Okay, lambda is wavelength. Lambda is ct, right? C is the velocity and t is the time. Actually, it should be this t. Okay, t is the period. Is equal to, so the period is f, right? 1/f. So this is f c or f. Therefore, the lower the frequency, the higher the wavelength, right? Therefore, for the original frequency, the wavelength is too long. So the longer the wavelength, the higher the antenna, right? Then you need to build a really, really high antenna in order to transmit a radio wave of a low frequency. Therefore, if you have this carrier wave, right, with much higher frequency carrier wave, then you can build a comparatively lower antenna, and then you can just transmit, right? Transmit the wave easily. So this is impractical to build a very high antenna, right? So therefore, this is why people use one of the reasons why people use modulation in order to to transmit the radio wave with the limited length, right, of antenna. Another reason would be another purpose of modulation is to transmit multiple channels of information through a single communication medium. Okay, so the radio waves from many transmitters pass through the air simultaneously without interfering with each other, because each transmitter, the radio waves oscillate at a different rate. In other words, each transmitter has a different frequency. So if you remember, what we talked about before, right? For the sound waves, so they actually don't interfere with each other because it's linear acoustics. Okay, so they follow the superposition principle and they just linearly add together. Okay, so they simple add. So there's no interfering between different waveforms. So when two waveforms meet in the air, they just simply add together, and you can decompose them, right? So therefore, we can add all the waveform together, and they won't interfere with each other whatsoever. And then you can get a new waveform, right, of various frequencies. And this is the integral wave, and this is what's transmitted through the channel, okay, through the channel of radio communication. And this is much easier to transmit one thing, right? Instead of you just design like specific channels to transmit all those waveforms, right? So actually you can transmit multiple channels of information through a single communication medium. So you just add them together and you just have this composed wave, and you just transmit them through this one communication channel. So after they pass through this, you can actually decompose, right? Decompose them because they are linearly adding together. But how to decompose them? This is because they have different frequencies. Okay. Each transmitter radio waves oscillate at different rates because these different carrier wave have different frequencies, right? So for each carrier wave, they will have a different carrier frequency. And for different carrier frequencies, when your radio receiver actually intercept this complex wave, actually, if you ever used like radio receiver, you can actually set, right? So this is your interface. You actually choose like which frequency you want. So like 331.3 hertz, right? Usually, when you choose different frequencies, you will receive different information. Yeah, I don't know if you have this experience, or have you ever like watched TV or some show talking about this. But if you have a radio receiver, actually you can set the frequency you want to receive. Okay, so when you intercept this composed waveform and you set a specific frequency, right? You set a specific frequency which one you want, and then you will only choose, right, this specific audio wave with the frequency of 331.3 hertz. Okay, and this hertz, this frequency is actually carrier frequency. Okay, the carrier frequency. So so for different information, you just using different carrier waves, different carrier frequencies to modulate them, and then you can just transmit everything together, through a single communication medium. And at the receiving side, you can just filter out the frequency you want. Okay, so this is much more simpler and more convenient. And more practical, right? So each transmitter has a different frequency. So this is the two reasons why we use a high frequency high frequency carrier wave, to modulate our signal, for radio. So after talking about radio, we are going to talk about tapes. Okay, let me see. How long is this? Okay. So I think we can continue with the tape, and after we finish the tape, we will take a break. Okay. It's not long. So just briefly, we'll talk about cassette tapes. So cassette tapes was kind of invented around 1958. tape recording uses electromagnetic induction, right? So it's the same kind of, same kind of mechanism as the microphone. It uses electromagnetic induction to convert an electric audio signal into magnetism, which is then used to realign magnetic particles on a reel of recording tape, creating a magnetic representation of the audio waveform. Right. So after the audio, the sound wave was transmitted as an electrical signal, right, by the microphone. So it goes through the microphone, become an electric signal, and then the electric signal will be convert into magnetism, right? And this is used to realign the magnetic particle on a reel of recording tape. Therefore, your sound is kind of recorded on the cassette tape as the magnetic patterns. So the playback of the recorded signal is the reverse process, where the magnetic signal on the tape is converted back into an electrical waveform, which is then sent to the audio console for mixing and processing, right? So if you think about viol, right? Viol is something like when I am talking here. So the viol is it's a physical cutting, right? It's a physical cutting of the waveform. And here, when you use the tapes, it's still kind of a cutting or kind of a record of your sound, but it's not physical cutting, right? It's not physical cutting, but it's you have a tape, and you have kind of like magnetic particles on here, and at first they are evenly attributed, and after you apply some electric signals, and then these particles will realign, right, into the shape, into the shape of this electric signal that you imposed, and then it will be realigned to other different kind of patterns, okay? And then this pattern actually records the sound pattern, the generated sound pattern that's encoded in this electrical signal. Okay. So it's still a type of storage, a type of recording sound or record, the sound waves, but it's in a different format. It's used the electronic magnetic induction. And also one comment is that so far all those techniques we talked about, right? The viols, the radio, and also including the tapes are all the analog. It's what we say, okay, analog. Analog signal processing. So they are continuous signals. So for the radio modulation and also the tapes, the electromagnetic induction, they all falls within this analog signal processing, okay, territory. So we are dealing with the because we know the sound wave is continuous, right? When we generate the sound, when I speak now, the sound wave in the air is continuous. Therefore, the analog is a kind of faithful representation of this. So from the sound wave, from sound wave to electronic wave and to magnetic wave. Okay. So all those waves are actually analog waves. Because all those waves are continuous, okay? They are of the form like continuous waveform, right? So after that, we will talk about the digital waves. Okay, digital waves. So digital waves will be discrete. Okay, so they will be sampling, basically sampling this wave to these discrete points. So this is the digital wave. And digital signals are used in CD, right? Compact discs and all our like computers and all the digital formats. So basically all the sound and the visual images we saw nowadays, through your phone or the computer are all in this form, in this digital, discrete form. But before this, when we talk about sound wave, electronic wave, and radio, tapes, vials, everything, they are all in continuous form. Okay, they are analog waves. So just some comment on this. Okay. So there will be the 2 videos talking about how cassette tape works. Let's watch them together.
Hello everyone, and welcome. Nowadays everything is digital, including the way we store and play our music. But there's something about the simple way we used to do it. I'm talking about the cassette tape, once the way to store and play music. It's a simple analog design, but how does it work? The tape consists of a thin plastic base material coated with ferric oxide powder. It's an oxide of iron. The oxide is ferromagnetic. This means that when it's placed in a magnetic field, it will be permanently magnetized. This is the basic principle of the cassette tape. That's also why you shouldn't store cassettes near magnets. If I take this magnet and rub it against this bolt, I will magnetize it. If I then take a compass and put the bolt near it, you can see it is attracted. The bolt has started the magnetic charge. The head is very simple in design. It's basically an iron core with a small gap at the bottom. A thin wire coil is wrapped around the core. When a current is forced through the coil, a magnetic field will be generated and the flux will jump across the gap. If the tape is moving below the head, the iron oxide will be magnetized at the signal that is provided to the coil. The electrical signal is now permanently stored in the magnetic tape. When reading the tape, the exact opposite happens. The tape moves below the head and the magnetic signal on the tape generates a small current in the coil. This current is amplified and sent to the speakers to reproduce the sound. Here I have a coil with an iron core. At the ends of the coil I attach this LED. If I now take a magnet, which resembles the magnetic charge in the tape, and move it past the core, you can see the LED lighting up. The magnetic charge is converted to an electrical signal. Let's take a look at the tape surface. The tape is divided into 2 parts, side A and side B. If the tape is done playing on one side, you can turn it around and play the other side. Each side has 2 channels, one for the left audio and the other for the right audio. Together they form the stereo band. These channels line up with the stereo head and the magnetic signal is converted to a small electrical signal. This is amplified and sent to the speakers. This, together with the right playing speed, is all it takes to play and record music on a simple analog way.
Here is another video talking about how a cassette tape works.
Tape recording uses electromagnetic induction to convert an electrical audio signal, a voltage, into magnetism, which is then used to realign magnetic particles on a reel of recording tape, creating a magnetic representation of the audio waveform. To play back the recorded signal, the reverse is done. The magnetic signal on the tape is converted back into an electrical waveform, again a voltage, which is then sent to the audio console for mixing and processing. Multi-track tape recorders do this independently for every track. Analog recording tape contains magnetic ferric oxide particles suspended in a slurry of chemicals and binders. The audio signal, the voltage to be recorded, is sent to the tape recorder where it's routed to the record head. This is basically a temporary magnet, or in the case of a multi-track recorder, a stack of independent magnets, one for each track. The record head converts the incoming voltage for a particular track into lines of magnetic force, or magnetic flux. The tape is pulled past the record head through the magnetic flux from the head, which forms at the gap of the magnet for a track in the record head. This magnetic field realigns the particles on tape to correspond to the positive and negative swings of the audio voltage, the audio waveform, creating a magnetic version of that waveform across the length of the tape. After the tape passes through the magnetic flux from the record head, the realigned magnetic particles retain their realignment. This is the actual recording, a magnetic representation of the audio wave, which has been permanently applied to the tape. The magnetic particles consist of domains. On a blank tape, these are randomly oriented, but as the tape is magnetized by the record head, they're reoriented to follow the polarity swings of the incoming magnetic flux, the incoming audio signal. The degree to which these particles retain the new magnetic state depends on the strength of the incoming signal. Weaker signals will realign only some domains, or a correspondingly lower recorded signal level. Stronger signals will magnetize more domains. When all the domains are magnetized, the tape is saturated. Higher incoming signal levels will not be reflected in the recording signal, gently clipping or distorting it at higher audio levels. Excess tape saturation is technically a flaw, but in small amounts it can add a little analog warmth and presence to the signal, and this effect, if managed carefully, is a part of the appealing sound of analog tape. To reproduce or play back a magnetic recording, the magnetized tape is pulled past another head, the repro or playback head. As the magnetized particles on tape pass this head, the magnetic flux from the tape is converted back into a varying voltage. This signal is then sent to an amplifier or mixer for playback or mixing and processing. Since the changing magnetic signal is recorded across the length of the tape, the actual length of the magnetic version of the waveform depends on the speed at which the tape is pulled past the heads. Tape speeds are measured in IPS, inches per second. For professional recordings, the standard speeds are 15 IPS and 30 IPS. Smaller or semi-pro recorders might operate at 15 or 7.5 IPS. 30 IPS provides the best high-frequency response and greatest freedom from audible dropouts, but eats up a lot of expensive open-reel tape, especially in multi-track recording, and requires more robust motors and mechanicals to handle the tape at the higher speed reliably. 15 IPS is a good alternative and offers slightly better low-end response. To make good quality recordings, analog tape recording needs to be a linear process. The incoming waveform must be accurately magnetized on tape and reproduced in playback. However, the process is inherently not linear. A perfect transfer characteristic would be graphed as a diagonal line, as you can see. But when saturation occurs with stronger signals, the response is, of course, nonlinear. Naturally, this can be avoided by simply preventing signal levels from exceeding the saturation point. Less obvious is the inherent nonlinearity of lower-level signals. When the audio signal is strong enough, recording linearity is achieved, but due to the inertia of the magnetic medium, weaker, lower-level signals may fail to magnetize enough domains, resulting in an inaccurate representation of the signal at low levels, which alters the waveform, creating undesirable third harmonic distortion. To remedy this, an inaudible, high-level, ultrasonic, high-frequency signal is recorded on the tape along with the audio signal. This is called the bias frequency. The combination of the weaker, low-level audio signal and the stronger, inaudible bias signal provides strong enough magnetic flux to allow for linear recording of the low-level audio, reducing the otherwise objectionable third harmonic distortion. The actual level of the bias signal applied is a trade-off. The optimum level for minimal distortion may cause the high-frequency response to fall off, so the bias level is set for the best balance between those two considerations based on the tape speed and formulation in use. We'll see how to make this over-bias setting when I cover the tape alignment procedure a little later in the course. Next up, a little more detail on the tape heads.
Okay, so this actually provides a more professional illustration of the working principle of tape. I think if you are interested, I think this is the third lecture, Physics of Tape. If you're interested, probably you can find this series of videos and watch this course lecture. Okay. So next we'll talk about compact disc. Therefore, we are actually moving from analog signals to the digital signals. So before that, let's take a break for 15 minutes. Let's get back at 3:50. Okay. Okay. See you later.